Tragically flat again, Melanie announced to the panel of judges, her voice dripping with rehearsed disappointment as my final note faded in the audition hall. Her betrayal cut deeper than any criticism I'd faced in my years of training with her. I stood frozen under the harsh spotlight, watching my dream role slip away while my heart thundered against my ribs. The judges whispered among themselves, not even bothering to look at me anymore. I caught fragments of their verdict: lacks emotional depth and technically inadequate. The scent of lemon polish from the freshly cleaned grand piano mixed with the staleness of the air conditioning, making me feel sick to my stomach. "Thank you for your time," I mumbled, gathering my sheet music with trembling hands. As I stumbled toward the exit, I heard Melanie call in her next student, Veronica, her star pupil. The heavy door hadn't even closed behind me when Veronica's voice soared through the audition piece I'd just butchered. Perfect pitch, perfect emotion, perfect everything. I fled down the corridor, the sound of applause chasing me like a cruel joke. 5 years of lessons with Melanie. 5 years of early mornings and late nights practicing until my throat burned. 5 years of paying premium rates for what she called exclusive coaching techniques. And in the moment that mattered most, she'd labeled me a failure in front of everyone who could have launched my career. Rain pounded against my windshield as I drove home, matching the rhythm of my sobs. The wipers squeaked across the glass, fighting a losing battle against the downpour. My phone buzzed repeatedly, probably friends asking how the audition went. I couldn't bear to answer. The traffic light ahead flashed yellow, then red. I pressed the brake pedal, but my car hydroplaned across the slick asphalt. Time seemed to stretch and slow as I headed toward the intersection. Headlights from the cross traffic blinded me. I braced for impact. Then everything stopped. The raindrops hung suspended in the air. The blaring horn from the oncoming truck silenced mid-blast. My body felt weightless, disconnected from reality. "This isn't your ending," whispered a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Light engulfed me, bright and warm. Memories flashed before my eyes. Not my life ending, but rewinding. I felt myself falling backward through time, through experiences, through feelings. My consciousness clung to each memory as it passed, refusing to let go. I gasped awake in unfamiliar yet instantly recognizable surroundings. My old apartment, the one before I moved in with Aiden. The one with the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a music note. My phone showed a date that made no sense, 5 years earlier, the day I'd first met Melanie. I'd been reborn. My hands shook as I stumbled to the bathroom, expecting to see my face bloodied from the crash. Instead, my 22-year-old reflection stared back at me. Younger, uncertain. But my eyes held something new. The knowledge of what was to come. On instinct, I opened my mouth and sang a simple scale. The sound that emerged sent chills down my spine. My voice had changed. The notes flowed with an otherworldly quality I'd never possessed before. Haunting, mesmerizing, impossible to ignore. I clutched the sink to steady myself as the implications sank in. The bitter taste of betrayal still lingered in my mouth from a future that hadn't happened yet. I wouldn't let Melanie destroy me again. This time, I had an advantage she couldn't possibly understand. Without thinking, I reached for my old recording equipment, gathering dust in the corner. The familiar weight of the microphone in my hand awakened something primal within me. I connected the cables with practiced movements, testing levels as a plan formed in my mind. If no one would give me a chance as myself, perhaps they would listen to a mystery. I pulled up a composition I'd never shared with anyone, one Melanie had called uncommercial and bizarre in that other timeline. My fingers hovered over the recording button as I decided on a name for my new persona. "Phantom voice," I whispered, pressing record. What emerged from my reborn vocal cords would change everything. The recording session lasted until dawn. I sang until my throat felt raw, experimenting with vocal techniques I'd never dared try before Melanie had drilled proper form into me. Without her restrictions, my voice found ranges and textures that defied conventional training. The neighbors banged on the walls twice, but I couldn't stop. This felt like breathing for the first time after years underwater. When I finally played back the tracks, I hardly recognized myself. The melodies twisted and soared with an almost supernatural quality. The hairs on my arms stood on end as I listened. This voice, my voice, carried emotions that pierced straight through to the soul. The room felt charged with electricity, like the air before a storm. I uploaded the first track anonymously to an indie music sharing site at 6 a.m. No photo, no bio, no explanation. Just the name, Phantom Voice, and a simple black icon. My finger hesitated over the submit button. In my previous life, I'd always sought approval before sharing anything. Now I pressed down firmly, sending my truth into the world without permission. By afternoon, I had 27 plays and 3 comments asking who the artist was. Not viral by any means, but more attention than anything I'd ever released had received. The sweet taste of vindication melted on my tongue like dark chocolate, bitter at first, then increasingly satisfying. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Voice lesson with Melanie, 4 p.m. My stomach churned at the thought of facing her again, knowing what she would eventually do to me. In my previous timeline, I'd been so desperate for her approval, so convinced she was my only path to success. Now I understood her game, building students up just enough to keep them paying, but never enough to outshine her former glory as a Broadway understudy. I texted her a cancellation, claiming illness. Then I did something my former self would have considered unthinkable. I blocked her number. The simple action sent a wave of liberation through my body. One small power move, but it felt monumental. Instead of going to my lesson, I spent the afternoon composing a new piece that incorporated vocal techniques Melanie had specifically forbidden: deliberate breaks, whispered verses, and what she called uncontrolled emotionality. The melody poured out of me without effort, as if it had been waiting all this time. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I paced the apartment, recording fragments of lyrics as they came to me. Outside, the city hummed with afternoon traffic, but in my small space, I was creating something that transcended the mundane world I'd been trapped in. By midnight, I had finished 3 complete songs. My voice carried the weight of experiences that technically hadn't happened yet: the rejection, the crash, the rebirth. I uploaded them all under the Phantom Voice persona, then collapsed into bed, emotionally drained but strangely peaceful. I woke to my phone constantly vibrating against the nightstand. The wooden surface amplified the sound, making it impossible to ignore. Sunlight streamed through blinds I'd forgotten to close, painting warm stripes across my blanket. I reached for the device, expecting mundane notifications. My heart lurched when I saw the numbers. Over 10,000 plays overnight, comments flooding in. Music blogs had picked up the tracks, speculating about the mysterious artist with the otherworldly voice. One prominent critic had written, "Whoever Phantom Voice is, they've mastered something beyond technical perfection. They've captured raw human experience in audio form." I scrambled to sit up, scrolling through the comments in disbelief. People described crying while listening, feeling understood in ways they couldn't explain. Some compared the sound to famous vocalists, but most agreed there was something entirely unique about Phantom Voice. My hands trembled with excitement and fear. In my previous life, I'd spent years begging for recognition, for just a moment of the attention that had now found me overnight. The irony wasn't lost on me. Success had come only when I'd stopped trying to please others, especially Melanie. A notification from a major streaming platform appeared. They wanted to feature Phantom Voice on their Discover playlist. The opportunity I'd been denied repeatedly in my past life had just fallen into my lap. I pressed accept with a surge of vindication warming my chest. Then I saw an email that made my blood freeze. Melanie had written to the generic address connected to the Phantom Voice account. "Fascinating vocal approach. I specialize in developing unique talents. Let me help take you to the next level." She didn't recognize my voice. The woman who had spent 5 years criticizing every note I sang couldn't identify me when I sang authentically. I laughed until tears streamed down my face, the sound echoing off the apartment walls. The smell of day-old coffee grounds from my overflowing trash can reminded me I'd barely moved from my creative trance in 24 hours. A dangerous idea formed in my mind. What if, instead of avoiding Melanie in this timeline, I approached her as someone new? Someone whose talent she couldn't deny? Someone who could make her regret every dismissive word? I crafted a careful response. Thank you for your interest. I'm considering selective coaching. What specific value would you bring to an artist like me? The professional tone concealed the satisfaction bubbling inside me. I imagined her scrambling to impress a potential high-profile client, never suspecting it was the student she was about to destroy. As Phantom Voice gained traction online, I maintained my regular identity as well. I applied to the same music program I'd joined in my previous life, knowing exactly what to expect. Playing this double role exhausted me, but watching people react differently to each version of myself fascinated me. The world worshipped the authentic voice they couldn't identify while overlooking the person right in front of them. 3 weeks after my rebirth, I received another calendar notification that sent a chill through me. Coffee with Aiden, Park Cafe, 3 p.m. In my previous timeline, this was the day I'd met the music producer who would become my boyfriend and later, another betrayer. My finger hovered over the decline button. I could simply not show up, avoiding that entire chapter of pain. But a better plan crystallized in my mind. Aiden had industry connections I could use, and this time I wouldn't be blinded by affection or gratitude. I knew exactly who he was beneath the charming exterior. I dressed carefully for the meeting, choosing an outfit that suggested talent but not desperation. As I applied a final touch of lipstick, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My eyes held secrets from a future no one else remembered. The scent of my perfume, something bold I would never have chosen before, strengthened my resolve. The cafe bustled with afternoon customers, the rich aroma of fresh espresso mixed with the sweet scent of pastries. I spotted Aiden immediately, exactly as I remembered him from our first meeting. Artfully tousled hair, expensive casual clothes, and a smile that had once made my heart race. Now I saw only the calculation behind it. "You must be the vocalist Jen recommended," he said, standing to greet me. "I'm Aiden Porter, producer with Elevation Records." I smiled, accepting his handshake with just the right amount of pressure. "Nice to meet you. I've heard promising things about your work." The conversation flowed exactly as before. His carefully practiced humility, his strategic name-dropping, his practiced way of making aspiring artists feel simultaneously special and slightly inferior. But this time, I knew the script. When he asked to hear something I'd been working on, I hesitated. This was the moment that would determine everything. In my previous life, I'd eagerly shared all my best material, which he later dismantled and criticized. "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "there's this anonymous artist I've been studying. They call themselves Phantom Voice. Have you heard them yet?" I watched his expression change as I played my own track. The hunger that came into his eyes as he recognized something marketable, something he could profit from, something he would never know was sitting right across from him. "This is extraordinary," he murmured, leaning forward. "Do you know who this is? I need to find them immediately." A clock above the cafe counter ticked loudly in the sudden silence between us. I had him exactly where I wanted him. "I might," I said with a small smile. "But first, tell me what you hear in this voice that you don't hear in mine." Aiden's expression shifted from excitement to calculation. He leaned back, studying me with new interest, the way a hunter reconsiders prey that might bite back. The coffee shop chatter faded into background noise as I waited for his answer. "That's an interesting question," he said, tapping his finger against his mug. The ceramic clinked with each tap, matching the quickening pace of my heart. Phantom Voice has something raw, almost supernatural. It's not about technical perfection, it's about emotional authenticity that can't be taught. I nodded slowly, controlling my expression despite the rage bubbling inside me. In my previous life, he'd used almost identical words to explain why my voice wasn't commercial enough. Now he praised the same qualities when he didn't know they were mine. "And my voice?" I prompted, keeping my tone light. He smiled with practiced sympathy that didn't reach his eyes. "You have excellent technique. With the right coaching and material, you could definitely book solid commercial work. Background vocals, jingles, that sort of thing. Just as before, word for word." I pulled my phone back, disconnecting it from the cafe's speaker system where my alter ego's voice had been playing. The sudden silence felt significant, like a door closing between worlds. That's interesting, I said, sliding my phone into my pocket. Because Phantom Voice is entirely self-taught. No formal training at all. His eyebrows shot up. You actually know them? Personally? I shrugged mysteriously, enjoying the power of withholding information he desperately wanted. Let's just say we share certain perspectives on the industry. Aiden leaned forward, coffee forgotten. I could almost see dollar signs reflecting in his pupils. The smell of his expensive cologne, sandalwood and something synthetic, wafted across the table, reminding me of nights I'd spent crying into pillows that carried that same scent after we broke up. I need to meet them, he insisted. Elevation would offer very favorable terms for talent like that. Very favorable. He pulled out his business card, pushing it toward me with an urgency he'd never shown for my own music. Can you connect us? I pocketed the card without looking at it. I might be able to arrange something, but Phantom Voice is selective about collaborations. Whatever they want, he promised eagerly. Creative control, higher points on streaming, preferred recording schedule. It's all negotiable. I struggled to contain my smile. Everything he was offering now had been absolutely impossible when I'd requested the same terms in my previous life. The taste of vindication was sweeter than the untouched pastry between us on the table. I'll pass along your interest, I said, standing to leave. But I should warn you, they have an excellent memory for how people treat others in the industry. Their collaboration decisions tend to reflect that. Confusion flashed across his face, quickly replaced by his professional smile. I always treat artists with the utmost respect. I'm sure, I replied, shouldering my bag. I'll be in touch about both opportunities, mine and theirs. As I walked away, I heard him call after me. I'll listen to your demo too, of course. Just email it over. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed my face as I fought back triumphant laughter. In my previous lifetime, I'd left that same cafe deflated, but pathetically grateful that someone of Aiden's stature had given me 15 minutes of his time. Now I walked away with him practically begging for my attention, without even knowing it. That evening, I recorded 2 new tracks for the Phantom Voice collection, channeling all my complicated emotions into the performance. The microphone captured every nuance of my voice, the subtle crack on high notes that Melanie had tried to train out of me, the breathy quality on sustained tones that she'd called amateur. These supposed flaws now became my signature sound, the very elements drawing listeners by the thousands. By morning, Aiden had emailed me 3 times, once about my own potential as a session vocalist, with significantly less enthusiasm, and twice about connecting him with Phantom Voice. His third message hinted at substantial financial incentives for making the introduction. The desperation in his tone delighted me. I forwarded his messages to a new email address I'd created specifically for my alter ego. Then I crafted a response from Phantom Voice to Aiden. Thank you for your interest. Before discussing any potential collaboration, I'm curious how you respond to new artists. Perhaps work with the vocalist who connected us first? Her success or failure under your guidance will determine my interest in Elevation Records. I pressed send and imagined his panic when he realized the mysterious artist he coveted was watching how he treated someone he considered a nobody. The wool blanket I'd wrapped around my shoulders felt suddenly warmer, comforting me like a shield against the cold industry I was learning to navigate on my own terms. My phone buzzed almost immediately with Aiden's reply to my regular email. Great news! After reviewing your background, I'd like to fast-track you for our Emerging Artist program. Can you come to the studio tomorrow? Bring any original material you have. I laughed out loud, startling my neighbor's cat that often napped on my fire escape. The animal shot me an offended look through the window before resuming its position in the sun. I spent the next day preparing for the studio session, but not in the way Aiden expected. Instead of bringing my most commercial-friendly songs as I had in my previous life, I selected pieces that showcased my most authentic voice, work I'd been too afraid to share before. When I arrived at Elevation Records, the familiar scent of soundproofing foam and electronic equipment triggered memories of rejection. Last time, I'd left this building in tears. The receptionist handed me a visitor badge, her fingers brushing against mine, cold from the aggressive air conditioning that always blasted through the building. Aiden's waiting in Studio C, she said, barely looking up from her computer. I found him setting up microphones with an engineer I recognized, Tomas, who would eventually become one of my few genuine supporters in the industry. In my previous life, we'd met months later under different circumstances. There she is, Aiden exclaimed with manufactured enthusiasm. Ready to work some magic. The session progressed very differently this time. When I sang, I abandoned the careful, technically perfect approach I'd used before, instead channeling the same raw energy I poured into my phantom voice recordings. Tomas's eyebrows raised almost immediately, his fingers adjusting levels with increased interest. Whoa, he muttered, meeting my eyes through the glass. That's unexpected. Aiden's reaction was more complex. Confusion, reassessment, and calculation all crossed his face in quick succession. The control room suddenly felt charged with tension. That's quite different from what I expected, Aiden said carefully when I finished. Your tone has a unique quality. Is that a problem? I asked innocently. He glanced at his phone, where I knew my alter ego's email sat unanswered. Not at all. Let's try another track. For 2 hours, I sang with the freedom of someone who knew exactly how this story could end. Each time, Tomas grew more excited, while Aiden became increasingly perplexed. The performance I gave wasn't quite phantom voice. I was careful to maintain some distinction, but it showed abilities Aiden hadn't anticipated. You've been holding out on me, he accused during a break, trying to sound playful rather than irritated. That voice could work for more than background tracks. I sipped water, hiding my smile. I'm just singing naturally. Isn't that what you wanted? Later that evening, I received another email from Aiden, offering me a preliminary contract, something he'd made me wait months for in my previous life. The terms were substantially better than before, though still nothing like what he'd offered to Phantom Voice. The clock on my kitchen wall ticked loudly as I considered my next move. Each second represented a choice in this new timeline I'd been granted. I could accept his offer, knowing what lay ahead. I could reject it entirely. Or I could start building a trap that would eventually expose him, Melanie, and everyone else who'd dismissed me. I drafted a careful response, accepting the initial meeting to discuss terms but making no commitments. Then I switched emails and responded as Phantom Voice. I've spoken with our mutual connection. Interesting that her voice suddenly shows commercial potential after my recommendation. I wonder, is your interest in her talent genuine, or merely a path to reach me? Time will tell. I'll be watching how this unfolds. My finger trembled slightly as it hovered over the send button. This message would set in motion events I couldn't fully control. Once I committed to this path of quiet vengeance, there would be no going back to the naive, grateful person I'd been before. The scent of rain drifted through my open window, promising a storm. I thought about the crash that had started this journey, the moment when time had stopped and given me another chance. Was this what that second chance was for? Revenge? Or something else entirely? Thunder rumbled in the distance as I pressed send. 3 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Phantom Voice's popularity exploded online after a music blogger with significant following featured the tracks in their Discoveries of the Week playlist. Meanwhile, Aiden called daily with updates about my contract, each conversation revealing his increasing desperation to please both versions of me without realizing they were the same person. We're thinking of featuring you in our New Voices showcase next month, he explained during our latest call. It's usually reserved for artists who've been with us longer, but I've convinced the executives to make an exception. The excitement in his voice seemed genuine, which amused me. In my previous life, I'd begged for a spot in that same showcase and been flatly denied. Now he offered it freely, all because he believed I could lead him to Phantom Voice. That sounds promising, I said neutrally. By the way, has Phantom Voice responded to your offer? His slight hesitation told me everything. We're in preliminary discussions. These anonymous artists often move slowly. The lie flowed easily from him, just as it had when he'd stolen my melody for Sierra in that other timeline. I understand, I replied, picturing his uncomfortable expression on the other end of the line. Anonymous artists have to be careful about who they trust. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Melanie. My stomach clenched as I opened it, remembering how thoroughly she had crushed my confidence before. The message was brief. Your cancellation was unfortunate. I've heard interesting things about your recent studio session at Elevation. Perhaps we should resume our work together. My schedule has an opening tomorrow at 2. Um, the familiar dismissive tone made my jaw tighten. Even her attempt at reconciliation carried the implication that I should be grateful for her attention. The wooden chair creaked beneath me as I shifted, considering my response. In my previous life, I would have jumped at this opportunity, apologizing profusely for missing our lesson and thanking her for another chance. Now, I understood the manipulation behind her words. She'd heard about my connection to Elevation and wanted to reestablish control. I decided to respond with professional distance. Thank you for reaching out. My schedule has changed significantly with new professional commitments. I'll contact you if my situation allows for lessons in the future. Hitting send unleashed a wave of exhilaration that tingled through my fingertips. Another small power move in this chess game of reclaiming my future. Melanie replied within minutes. Don't let early success derail your technical development. Your natural talent requires proper guidance to avoid career-limiting habits. My students who achieve sustainable careers understand this. The thinly veiled threat that I would fail without her would have terrified me before. Now it only strengthened my resolve. I closed the email without responding, the decisive click of my mouse punctuating my refusal to engage. That night, I created my most ambitious phantom voice track yet. I recorded in my bathroom, where the tile walls created a natural reverb that gave my voice an ethereal quality. The hot water from the shower had created a steamy atmosphere that loosened my vocal cords. Each note emerged with effortless power that I'd never achieved in Melanie's sterile studio. The lyrics flowed directly from my experience, a haunting melody about time freezing and second chances. I deliberately included vocal techniques Melanie had specifically forbidden, embracing the breaks and imperfections that made the performance human. The resulting track felt alive in a way none of my previous recordings had. I uploaded it at midnight, then fell into an exhausted sleep. The distant sound of sirens wailed somewhere in the city, merging with my dreams of performing to adoring crowds while Melanie and Aiden watched helplessly from the sidelines. By morning, the new track had gone viral. Music forums buzzed with theories about Phantom Voice's identity. Some users claimed to recognize elements of famous singers, while others insisted this was someone entirely new to the industry. Major labels had begun posting public messages hoping to connect with the mysterious artist. Aiden called 7 times before noon. When I finally answered, the panic in his voice was palpable. "Have you heard the new Phantom Voice track?" he demanded without greeting. "It's everywhere. Universal and Sony are both making public offers. We need to move quickly if Elevation wants any chance." I stretched lazily on my couch, enjoying his distress. I heard it. Pretty impressive range, don't you think? Especially those high notes Melanie always told me were impossible for my voice type. "What? Never mind that," he dismissed, not catching my deliberate hint. "Can you contact them today? Tell them Elevation is prepared to offer complete creative control and a signing bonus that exceeds any other offer on the table." I smiled into the phone. "I'll see what I can do. By the way, how's my contract coming along?" "It's being finalized now," he assured quickly. "But honestly, connecting us with Phantom Voice would guarantee you premium treatment at Elevation. Career-making move." After ending the call, I turned my attention to the growing number of interview requests for Phantom Voice. Music journalists, podcast hosts, and radio programs all wanted exclusives with the industry's newest sensation. The irony wasn't lost on me. In my previous life, I couldn't get a music blogger to return my emails. A notification from my banking app interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find that my tracks had generated more revenue in 3 weeks than I'd earned in 6 months at my day job in my previous life. The financial freedom this offered created new possibilities I hadn't considered. I could produce my own music now, without Elevation or any label. I could create my own path, revealing myself as Phantom Voice when the moment was right. The realization made me dizzy with potential. The rich aroma of fresh coffee filled my apartment as I brewed a pot and considered my next move. Outside, rain tapped against my windows with increasing urgency, matching the rhythm of my thoughts. Each drop represented a possibility in this new timeline. My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "This is Tomas from Elevation. Your session was incredible. Not sure if Aiden mentioned, but I'm working with some independent artists on a side project. Would love to talk. This is my personal number. My heart leaped with unexpected hope. Tomas had been my ally before, recognizing my talent when others dismissed it. Perhaps in this timeline, our partnership could begin even earlier. I texted back, "Definitely interested. When can we meet?" His response came quickly. "Tomorrow night, small studio in Brooklyn, no corporate ears. Bring whatever you're working on that Aiden might not get." The opportunity felt like a gift from my former timeline, a connection that had once been positive, reappearing when I needed it most. I agreed to the meeting, already planning which tracks to bring. Later that afternoon, I passed by a music store and froze when I saw Melanie inside, working with a young vocalist who looked painfully familiar. With a shock, I recognized Veronica, the student who had replaced me at that fateful audition in my previous life. I lingered outside, watching through the glass as Melanie performed her usual routine. Excessive praise followed by crushing criticism, creating the emotional dependency that kept her students paying for years. The young woman's shoulders slumped with each correction, her confidence visibly eroding under Melanie's guidance. The sight ignited something protective in me. Without thinking, I entered the store, pretending to browse sheet music within earshot of their lesson. "Your breathing technique undermines your potential," Melanie was saying in her authoritative tone. "Without proper training, you'll never advance beyond amateur productions." I hummed softly as I flipped through music books, deliberately using the breathing technique Melanie was criticizing. The melody from my latest Phantom voice track flowed effortlessly, just loud enough for them to hear. Both women turned toward me, Melanie with irritation and Veronica with curiosity. I met the young woman's eyes briefly, giving her a small, encouraging smile, before returning to the sheet music. "As I was saying," Melanie continued with a forced patience, "proper technique is essential for professional success. Perhaps we should move to the practice room to avoid distractions." As they gathered their materials, I slipped a business card into Veronica's folder. Not mine, but one I'd created for a fictional vocal coach offering free consultations. The web address on the card would lead to my finest Phantom voice recordings and a simple message: true technique serves the emotion, not the other way around. This small act of sabotage against Melanie's teaching methods satisfied something deep within me. The fabric of her influence began to unravel with this single thread I'd pulled. That evening, Aiden called again, this time with a formal offer for my friend Phantom Voice. Exclusive contract, massive advance, worldwide distribution. His voice held the strained quality of someone trying to hide desperation. "I'm authorized to negotiate directly," he explained. "No need to involve the full legal team until we have preliminary agreement." I recognized this tactic from before, his attempt to secure talent before other executives could intervene. In my previous life, I'd signed away rights I didn't understand because of this exact pressure. "I'll pass along the offer," I said neutrally. "But I should warn you, Phantom Voice has concerns about how Elevation treats its developing artists." His laugh sounded hollow through the phone. "We treat all our artists like family." "That's exactly what worries them," I replied, ending the call before he could respond. The digital clock on my microwave blinked 11:27 p.m. In less than 24 hours, I would meet with Tomas to discuss opportunities outside Elevation's corporate structure. The possibility both excited and frightened me. In my previous timeline, Tomas had been genuine, but this reality had already shown significant differences. Could I trust anyone in this industry, or was I destined to fight this battle completely alone? I sat at my keyboard and began composing something new. A piece that combined my identity as the struggling vocalist with the power of Phantom Voice. For the first time, I considered the possibility of merging these two parts of myself, not in exposure or revenge, but in honest artistic expression. The composition flowed until dawn, becoming something more complex and truthful than anything I'd created before. As the first light filtered through my blinds, casting striped shadows across my living room floor, I made a decision that would change everything. Tonight, at my meeting with Tomas, I would reveal myself as Phantom Voice. I left Tomas's studio as the city was waking up, my mind racing with possibilities. We had created a detailed timeline, identifying exactly when and how I would reveal myself as Phantom Voice. The cool morning air smelled of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, grounding me in this moment even as I planned my future. My phone buzzed with a text from Aiden. Contract being finalized now. Need to meet at 10 a.m. to review details before executive presentation. This is happening fast. I smiled at his transparent urgency. In my previous life, I would have rushed to accommodate his schedule, grateful for the opportunity. Now I understood the power dynamics at play. I texted back, "Can't make 10. Available at 11:30 just before your executive meeting. Take it or leave it." His response came seconds later, "Fine, 11:30 at Elevation." A tiny victory, but it felt significant. Each small assertion of control helped build my confidence for the larger battles ahead. At my apartment, I showered and changed, selecting an outfit that balanced professionalism with artistic credibility. The mirror reflected someone I barely recognized, not just physically younger than the woman who had crashed her car 5 years in the future, but fundamentally different in posture and expression. This version of me carried herself with the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly how the story could end. I packed my bag carefully, including a small digital recorder Tomas had given me. "Record everything," he had insisted. "Every meeting, every promise. This industry runs on convenient memory lapses." At precisely 11:35, I walked into Aiden's office at Elevation Records, making him wait those extra 5 minutes deliberately. The familiar space looked exactly as I remembered it: awards lining the walls, expensive minimalist furniture, and the large window overlooking the city that he positioned visitors to face, ensuring they would be slightly blinded by light while he remained in shadow. "There she is," he said, rising from behind his desk with practiced warmth. "Our soon-to-be star." Two other people sat in the office, a woman I recognized as Jessica, the head of legal, and a man I didn't know who wore the unmistakable sleek suit of a high-level executive. "This is Marcus Delano, VP of Artist Development," Aiden introduced the man. "He's personally overseeing this project." Marcus didn't stand, merely nodding in my direction. "Aiden tells me you're our phantom voice. Impressive work on those tracks." The bluntness of his statement caught me off guard. Not going to be positioned as, or will be introduced as, but simply are. They'd already decided this narrative, regardless of my input. "That's what we're here to discuss," I replied carefully, taking a seat without waiting to be offered one. The leather chair felt cool against my back, the material creaking softly as I settled in. Aiden placed a thick contract on the desk between us. "This is the most aggressive first artist deal I've ever seen Elevation offer," he said proudly. "Full marketing push, priority release scheduling, and an advance that's—" He paused dramatically. "Well, let's just say it acknowledges the value you're bringing to the table." Jessica slid the document toward me. "We'll need your signature today to move forward with the announcement next week." I made no move to take the contract. "I'd like to review it first, thoroughly." Marcus chuckled as if I'd said something amusing. "Of course, but we're on a tight timeline. The phantom voice momentum is peaking now. Waiting risks losing the audience's attention." The pressure tactics were exactly as Tomas had predicted. I maintained a neutral expression, remembering his advice. "They'll try to rush you. That's when you know the deal favors them more than you." "I understand timelines," I said calmly, "but I won't sign anything I haven't read carefully. I'd also like my own legal representation to review it." Aiden's smile tightened slightly. "We can give you today, but we need this executed by morning if we're going to make the announcement next week. The marketing team is already working on concepts." I nodded, taking the contract but not opening it yet. "Before I review this, I need clarity on exactly what you're proposing. You want me to claim I'm Phantom Voice and re-record the existing tracks?" "Not just claim," Marcus interjected. "You would be Phantom Voice. Officially. Exclusively. The contract includes language that assigns all existing recordings to Elevation and prohibits you from releasing music under that name through any other channels." Exactly what we'd anticipated. They wanted complete control of the Phantom Voice identity. "And what happens when the real creator comes forward?" I asked innocently. Jessica spoke up, her voice carrying the precise tone of someone who had rehearsed this answer. "Our investigation indicates the tracks were posted through anonymizing services. The actual vocalist has deliberately concealed their identity, likely because they lack proper work authorization or have existing contractual obligations preventing them from releasing new music. The fabricated explanation was so confident that I almost laughed. The music industry was apparently willing to construct entire fictional scenarios to justify their exploitation. In other words, I clarified, you're betting they can't or won't reveal themselves. Precisely, Marcus confirmed without a hint of ethical concern. And if anyone does come forward, our legal position will be that they're an imposter trying to capitalize on the campaign we've built around you. The sheer audacity stunned me into momentary silence. The room suddenly felt too warm, the scent of Aiden's expensive cologne cloying and oppressive. I see, I finally managed, and you're comfortable with this approach? Aiden leaned forward, his expression earnest. This is how careers are made. The original tracks are good, but with our production team, your voice, and proper marketing, this could be extraordinary. Sometimes opportunity requires creative solutions. Creative solutions, I repeated slowly. That's an interesting way to phrase it. I opened the contract and began scanning the first pages, buying time to process everything I'd just heard. The document was dense with legal terminology, but certain clauses jumped out immediately. The exclusivity provisions were aggressive, the rights assignments comprehensive, and the options for future albums heavily favored the label. The advance is on page 12, Aiden prompted, clearly anxious to highlight what he considered the selling point. I turned to the page and couldn't help my eyebrows rising. The figure was substantial, nearly 5 times what they'd originally offered me in my previous timeline. The desperation to secure Phantom Voice was evident in every digit. Impressive, I acknowledged, but money isn't everything. Marcus made a sound somewhere between a scoff and a laugh. In this business, it usually is. I closed the contract and met his gaze directly. Not to the real Phantom Voice. They chose artistic integrity over commercial success by releasing their music independently. That suggests they value creative control more than financial gain. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. I could almost see the calculations happening behind their eyes. Had they misjudged my motivations? Was I going to be more difficult to manipulate than anticipated? Aiden recovered first. Which is why this deal offers unprecedented creative input. You'll work directly with our top producers but maintain your unique sound. The best of both worlds. I stood, tucking the contract into my bag. I'll review this and get back to you by morning, as requested. One more thing, Marcus said as I turned to leave. This offer is contingent on your agreement to the Phantom Voice positioning. Without that, we'd be looking at a standard new artist deal with significantly different terms. The threat was clear: play by their rules or be treated like every other desperate musician. I understand completely, I assured him with a smile that revealed nothing of my true thoughts. By the way, do you have the original Phantom Voice tracks in your system? I'd like to study them more closely to make sure I can capture the same qualities in the re-recordings. Aiden seemed relieved by what he perceived as my cooperation. Absolutely, I'll send them right now. As I left the Elevation offices, my phone pinged with his email containing download links to my own tracks, the very ones I had created in my bathroom studio. The irony was almost too perfect. Outside, the midday sun felt cleansing after the stifling atmosphere of corporate manipulation. I hailed a cab and directed the driver to Tomas's studio, where he was waiting for our debriefing. Well? He asked as soon as I walked in, his expression eager and concerned simultaneously. Exactly as we predicted, I confirmed, pulling out the digital recorder and playing back the meeting. They want complete control of the Phantom Voice identity and are prepared to legally fight anyone who claims to be the original artist. Tomas listened intently to the recording, shaking his head in disgust at certain points. The part about lacking work authorization is a new one, creative indeed. What struck me most was their confidence, I said, settling onto the studio couch. The fabric was worn but comfortable, smelling faintly of coffee and guitar strings. They genuinely believe they can rewrite reality if they throw enough money and marketing at it. Welcome to the major label system, Tomas replied with a humorless laugh. So we move forward with the plan? I nodded, certainty crystallizing within me. Phase 1 begins tomorrow. I'll sign their contract with the modifications your lawyer suggested. becoming their official phantom voice while continuing to release the real tracks independently through your channels. The complexity of what we were attempting hit me suddenly. I would be publicly claiming to be myself, while secretly continuing to be myself outside their control. The mental gymnastics required were dizzying. When they announce you next week, the underground music community will explode with theories and accusations, Tomas predicted, excitement creeping into his voice. The authentic fans will know something's off, which creates the perfect environment for Phase 2, I continued. A mysterious message from the real phantom voice challenging the corporate version to a live performance showdown. Tomas grinned, already adjusting equipment settings on his board. The ultimate publicity stunt that they didn't orchestrate. They'll be forced to accept the challenge or look afraid. The plan was audacious, risky, and potentially industry-changing. If successful, it would not only secure my career on my terms, but expose the manipulative practices that had crushed so many talented artists before me. My phone buzzed with a text from Aiden. Executives loved the concept. Press release being drafted now for next Tuesday. Need your signature by 9 a.m. tomorrow. I showed it to Tomas, who shook his head at the aggressive timeline. They're really pushing this through. You ready? More than ready, I assured him, though butterflies danced in my stomach. I've already lived the version where I let them dictate my future, not this time. We spent the rest of the day recording new phantom voice material that would release anonymously the day after Elevation's big announcement. Songs that would be impossible for me to have created in the narrow time frame between signing and release, creating the first crack in their narrative. As evening approached, another unexpected text arrived, this one from Melanie. Hearing interesting industry rumors, perhaps we should discuss your vocal preparation for upcoming opportunities. My schedule has suddenly opened up. The transparent attempt to reinsert herself into my success story would have worked in my previous life. I would have interpreted it as reconciliation, as validation, as the approval I'd so desperately sought. Now I recognized it for what it was: opportunism wrapped in mentorship packaging. She had somehow heard about my pending deal and wanted to position herself to take credit for my success. I showed the message to Tomas, who rolled his eyes. Classic move. Once they smell money, they all come crawling back claiming they always believed in you. She'll be at the announcement for sure, I predicted. Probably tell everyone how she discovered me. Then she becomes part of Phase 3, Tomas said with a gleam in his eye, the reckoning. As night fell, we finalized our strategy, accounting for every possible complication. The stakes were enormous. If Elevation discovered my deception before the planned revelation, they could pursue significant legal action. We were betting everything on perfect timing and execution. I left Tomas's studio well after midnight, my mind electric with plans despite my physical exhaustion. The city streets were quieter now, the late-night emptiness creating an acoustic chamber where every sound echoed with unusual clarity. A distant siren wailed somewhere to the east. A stray cat knocked over something metallic in an alley. The world continued its ordinary rhythm, unaware that my extraordinary second chance was about to change everything. Back at my apartment, I sat with the contract spread across my kitchen table, making careful notes about the modifications I would insist upon tomorrow. The lamp cast a warm glow over the pages, highlighting certain phrases that attempted to claim ownership of my very identity. In just 12 hours, I would sign myself away to reclaim myself. The paradox was perfect poetry, exactly the kind of complex emotion that had made Phantom Voice resonate with listeners in the first place. I opened my computer and began composing what would become the most important song of the entire project, the one I would perform live when the truth was finally revealed. Every lyric needed to capture this journey without revealing the impossible parts. Every note needed to bridge the gap between the person I had been and the person I was becoming. As I worked through the night, a strange peace settled over me. Whatever happened next, success or failure, this path was mine. No one else was writing my story this time. Morning arrived with harsh clarity, sunlight streaming through blinds I'd forgotten to close. I had dozed off at my keyboard sometime around 4 a.m., the nearly completed Revelation song saved but unfinished. My neck ached from the awkward position, a physical reminder of the intense focus I'd maintained through the night. The digital clock on my microwave blinked 7:13 a.m. Less than 2 hours until I needed to be at elevation with my decision. I stretched, feeling the popping of tight joints and the fog of insufficient sleep clouding my thoughts. The coffee maker gurgled to life at my touch, its mechanical sounds oddly comforting in the quiet apartment. While waiting for the coffee, I scrolled through my notifications. 3 missed calls from Aiden, a text from Tomas confirming our plan, and, surprisingly, an email from Veronica, Melanie's star student. The subject line simply read, "Is it really you?" My heart jumped into my throat as I opened it. Had she somehow discovered my dual identity? The message was brief, but sent adrenaline coursing through my system. "I found your card in my folder after our lesson, visited the website. That voice. It's Phantom Voice, isn't it? The one everyone's talking about. And you're somehow connected. Melanie says it's technically flawed, but I've never heard anything so pure. Can we talk? Privately?" The coffee machine beeped, signaling it had finished brewing, but I barely noticed. This unexpected development could either complicate our plan or provide an unexpected ally. Veronica had been a pawn in my downfall before, but in this timeline, perhaps she could serve a different role. I composed a careful reply. "Yes to all your questions. Meeting soon might be complicated given current circumstances. Watch the music news next week. After that, we'll talk. Trust your instincts about vocal technique, not just what you're told." The rich aroma of fresh coffee finally broke through my concentration. I poured a cup, the warmth of the mug against my palms centering me, as I considered the day ahead. The bitter liquid tasted like fuel for the battle to come, necessary rather than enjoyable. After a quick shower and change into carefully selected attire, professional enough for a contract signing but with subtle artistic elements, I gathered my materials. The modified contract with my lawyer's recommended changes, the digital recorder tucked discreetly in my jacket pocket, and a small USB drive containing something Tomas and I had prepared as insurance. The Elevation Records building looked particularly imposing this morning, glass and steel stretching skyward with corporate confidence. I took a deep breath before entering, the artificially cooled air hitting my face as the doors slid open. The lobby smelled of expensive air freshener and the faint leather aroma from designer furniture. "They're waiting for you in the conference room," the receptionist informed me with newfound respect in her tone. Word had clearly spread about my impending status. The elevator ride to the executive floor gave me one last moment of solitude. I checked my reflection in the polished metal walls, noting how different I looked from just weeks ago when I'd first been reborn into this timeline. The uncertainty was gone from my eyes, replaced by quiet determination. The conference room contained more people than I'd expected. Besides Aiden, Marcus, and Jessica from legal, several marketing executives and a photographer were positioned around the large table. A display board featured mock-ups of album art with my face emblazoned with the words, "The voice behind the phantom." "There she is!" Aiden exclaimed with excessive enthusiasm, rushing to guide me to a seat at the head of the table. "Our star of the hour." Everyone looked at me with that particular blend of assessment and calculation that defined the industry, measuring my marketability, my malleability, my potential profitability. The scrutiny made my skin prickle with discomfort, but I maintained a composed expression. "I've reviewed the contract," I said, placing my version on the table. "I have some required modifications." Jessica's professional smile faltered slightly. "We were expecting a simple signature this morning. The press release is already finalized for Tuesday." "I understand your timeline," I replied calmly, channeling the confidence I'd developed as Phantom Voice. "But as I mentioned yesterday, I won't sign anything that doesn't protect my interests adequately." The atmosphere in the room chilled noticeably. Marcus leaned forward, his authoritative presence filling the space. "What modifications are we talking about?" I slid my version toward Jessica, primarily 3 areas. First, creative control needs to be explicit and final, not collaborative input that you can override. Second, the ownership of the Phantom Voice persona needs to be joint rather than exclusively Elevation's. Third, the re-recording schedule needs to be extended to allow proper artistic development. The room fell silent as Jessica quickly scanned the changes, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "These are substantial alterations to our standard language," she finally said, looking to Marcus rather than addressing me directly. The phantom voice phenomenon isn't standard either, I countered. You're asking me to assume a significant identity. The terms should reflect that uniqueness. Aiden jumped in, clearly trying to salvage the situation. These are reasonable discussions we can have, but perhaps not with the full team present. Maybe Jessica, Marcus, and I could meet with you privately to address these points? His transparent attempt to isolate me for more effective pressure was exactly what Tomas had warned about. Actually, I'm comfortable discussing this with everyone present, I replied. After all, we'll all be working together on this project, right? The subtle power move forced them to either proceed publicly or explicitly exclude their own team. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he recognized the gentle trap. Fine, he conceded. Let's address these points one by one. For the next hour, we negotiated each modification. They pushed back hard on the joint ownership clause, offering increasingly creative reasons why Elevation needed exclusive control of the phantom voice identity. I remained firm, explaining that my authentic connection to the persona required maintaining some ownership. The entire marketing concept depends on your complete embodiment of this identity, Jessica argued. Divided ownership creates potential future complications. It's precisely because I'm embodying this identity that I need to maintain partial ownership, I countered. Unless, of course, you're concerned the actual creator might emerge with competing claims. The question hung in the air, uncomfortably direct. Marcus and Jessica exchanged glances that confirmed they had indeed discussed this possibility extensively. Our legal position on that hypothetical scenario is solid, Jessica finally stated. But your point about embodiment has merit. We can adjust to joint ownership with specific usage parameters. Small victory by small victory, we worked through the document. The marketing team grew visibly restless as their carefully planned timeline faced potential delays. The photographer periodically checked his watch, equipment untouched in the corner. We need photos today for the Tuesday announcement, one marketing executive finally interjected. The design team requires at least 3 days for final layouts. Aiden seized the opportunity. Perhaps we could proceed with the preliminary photos while Jessica finalizes the language changes, then sign before you leave today? The pressure tactic was obvious but effective. They were creating a situation where my refusal would disappoint an entire team of people just trying to do their jobs. In my previous life, this approach would have worked perfectly on my people-pleasing nature. But I had prepared for this. Actually, I said with rehearsed casualness, I brought something that might help. I removed the USB drive from my pocket and handed it to the marketing director. These are professional photos taken recently. They match your branding concept and are already edited. You're welcome to use them for the initial announcement while we finalize the contract details. The room's energy shifted immediately. The marketing team excitedly plugged in the drive to view the images on the conference room screen. Tomas had arranged a professional photo shoot days earlier, anticipating exactly this situation. The striking images that appeared, me in shadowy lighting with artistic elements that evoked the phantom theme, were actually better than anything they could have created in a rushed session today. These are excellent, the marketing director admitted, scrolling through the options. High concept, mysterious yet revealing. Perfect for the launch. Aiden looked both impressed and slightly unsettled by my foresight. You've clearly given this considerable thought. I take my career seriously, I replied simply. So, shall we continue with the contract modifications while they work with the photos? By early afternoon, we had reached agreement on most points. My creative control was secured with only minimal compromise, the joint ownership established with clear parameters, and the recording schedule extended to allow artistic integrity. The only remaining sticking point was the advance payment structure. They wanted to spread it across milestones, while I insisted on a substantial initial payment. The industry standard is to tie compensation to deliverables, Marcus explained with thinning patience. It ensures mutual commitment to project completion. The standard approach assumes standard circumstances, I replied, feeling fatigue beginning to creep into my voice after hours of negotiation. This situation is unique. I'm taking on significant personal and professional risk by claiming this identity. The compensation structure should reflect that risk. Jessica leaned forward. What exactly do you mean by risk? I met her gaze steadily. Public scrutiny, questions about authenticity. Potential backlash if the audience rejects the narrative. My reputation is on the line in ways that Elevation's corporate identity isn't. A heavy silence fell over the room as they considered my words. For the first time, I sensed a flicker of genuine respect beneath their calculated business personas. I had forced them to acknowledge me as a savvy equal rather than an eager novice grateful for their attention. We can restructure the advance, Marcus finally conceded. 60% upfront, remainder at project milestones. 75%, I countered. 65, and we expedite the payment to clear within 3 business days. Done, I agreed, knowing I had pushed as far as possible without derailing the entire agreement. Jessica made the final adjustments to the document, then printed fresh copies for everyone to review. As pages circulated around the table, Aiden approached me quietly. "You've impressed everyone today," he said, his voice low enough that others couldn't hear. Not many new artists could hold their own in a negotiation like this. "I'm not exactly new," I replied with deliberate ambiguity, "just new to Elevation." He studied me with renewed curiosity. "You know, when this all started, I thought you were just a promising vocalist who might lead us to Phantom Voice. Now I'm beginning to wonder if there's more to your story." The moment stretched between us, charged with unspoken questions. For a brief instant, I considered telling him the truth, watching his expression as he realized he'd been negotiating with Phantom Voice all along. The temptation to reveal everything prematurely was almost overwhelming. Instead, I smiled enigmatically. "Everyone has more to their story than first appears, don't they, Aiden?" Before he could respond, Jessica called everyone's attention to the finalized contract. "If everyone is satisfied with the revisions, we're ready for signatures." The weight of the moment pressed against my chest as I accepted the pen. Everything we had planned hinged on this signature. The careful deception, the strategic revelation, the ultimate reckoning. Once signed, there would be no turning back. I scrawled my name on the designated lines, the ink flowing smoothly across the paper that would bind me to a bizarre agreement to be myself while pretending I wasn't already myself. The paradox would have been amusing if so much weren't at stake. "Congratulations," Marcus said formally as I signed the final page. "Welcome to Elevation Records and to your new identity as Phantom Voice." The room erupted in applause, glasses of champagne appearing as if by magic from a side table. Toasts were made to success, to creative partnership, to groundbreaking music. I participated in the celebration mechanically, my mind already racing ahead to the next phases of our plan. As the gathering began to disperse, Aiden caught me at the door. "The hard part's over," he assured me. "From here, it's just about making great music and letting us handle the rest." I smiled, knowing just how wrong he was. "Actually, Aiden, the real work is just beginning, but I'm looking forward to surprising everyone with what comes next." I left the Elevation building feeling simultaneously exhausted and energized. The contract in my bag represented both a shackle and a key, binding me to their system while providing the very tool I would use to break free on my own terms. Outside, the afternoon sun felt cleansing after hours under fluorescent lights. I pulled out my phone to text Tomas a single word, "Signed." His response came immediately. "Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 begins Tuesday." I looked up at the Elevation Records logo prominently displayed on the building's facade, gleaming in the sunlight with corporate confidence. They believed they had just acquired control of Phantom Voice, never suspecting they had invited the actual Phantom directly into their midst. In just 5 days, the real performance would begin. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Tomas and I worked relentlessly, finalizing the tracks that would release immediately after Elevation's announcement. These new songs needed to be unmistakably Phantom Voice in style, yet clearly impossible for me to have created within the Elevation timeline. We deliberately incorporated vocal techniques that would take months to master, evidence that would later support our revelation. "How are you holding up?" Tomas asked Sunday evening as we put finishing touches on the third track. The studio had become my second home, its familiar sense of coffee and electronic equipment now comforting rather than foreign. "Honestly, I'm terrified and exhilarated at the same time," I admitted, slipping off the headphones. The pressure had left a slight indentation in my hair that I absently tried to smooth. It's strange knowing exactly what's coming, but still feeling nervous about it. He nodded, making a final adjustment to the levels. That's because in your previous timeline, you were just reacting to things happening to you. Now you're the one making them happen. His insight struck me deeply. The fundamental difference between my past and present wasn't just foreknowledge, it was agency. I was no longer a victim of circumstance, but an architect of consequences. Monday morning brought a flurry of emails from Elevation's marketing team, each more urgent than the last. The press release had been finalized, social media announcements scheduled, and a launch party planned for Tuesday evening at an exclusive venue in Manhattan. They needed my approval on final language, confirmation of attendance, and preferences for the event. I provided what they needed while maintaining a careful emotional distance from their excitement. Their eagerness to package and present me as their discovery would make the eventual revelation all the more powerful. That afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. "Is this the vocalist signed to Elevation yesterday?" The woman's voice was crisp, professional. "Yes, this is she," I confirmed, curiosity piqued. "Excellent. This is Diana Reynolds with Music Today magazine. We've been given an exclusive first interview with you before tomorrow's announcement. Are you available in the next 2 hours?" My heart raced. Elevation hadn't mentioned any pre-announcement interviews. This was either a breach in their carefully controlled rollout, or, more likely, Aiden attempting to lock me into the narrative before I could reconsider. "I wasn't informed about any interviews before the official announcement," I replied carefully. A brief pause. "Mr. Porter assured us this was cleared with you. He specifically mentioned you were eager to share your journey as Phantom Voice." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost amusing. Aiden was trying to create a situation where backing out would make me appear difficult and unprofessional. "I'm afraid there's been a miscommunication," I said firmly. "All media engagements need to follow the approval process outlined in my contract. Please contact Jessica Myers in legal to schedule properly." The journalist sighed with poorly concealed frustration. "The issue is timing. Our piece is meant to coincide with tomorrow's announcement. Without your interview today, we'll have to run with the press release quotes only." "I understand the challenge," I replied, maintaining my composure. "But I need to respect the processes I've agreed to. I'm looking forward to speaking with Music Today after the proper arrangements are made." After ending the call, I immediately contacted Jessica, forwarding the details of the attempted interview. Her response was swift and apologetic. "This was not authorized through proper channels. I've spoken with Aiden about following contractual procedures. This won't happen again." Small victory, but significant. I had established early that I wouldn't be manipulated or pressured beyond the agreements we'd made. Boundaries were crucial with people like Aiden, who viewed contracts as suggestions rather than binding frameworks. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Aiden this time. "What happened with Music Today?" he demanded without greeting. "They called saying you refused the interview." "I didn't refuse," I corrected calmly. "I directed them to follow the approval process in our contract. You know, the one we spent an entire day negotiating?" His frustrated exhale was audible. "That process is for regular publicity later in the campaign. This is the launch announcement. Different dynamics, tighter deadlines." "Then that distinction should have been in the contract," I replied, refusing to be rushed or pressured. "I'm not doing interviews I haven't been properly briefed for." "We need this piece to shape the narrative from day one," he insisted, his voice taking on the persuasive tone I remembered well from my previous timeline. "First impressions matter enormously in these situations." "I agree completely," I said, "which is why I want to do it right, not rushed. Schedule it properly for later this week, give me the briefing materials in advance, and I'll give an incredible interview." The silence stretched between us as he recognized I wouldn't budge. The familiar scent of my apartment's lavender candle filled the pause, grounding me in my resolve. "Fine," he finally conceded, "but I need you fully prepared for tomorrow's announcement and party. Car will pick you up at 4 p.m. for final prep before the 7 p.m. event." "I'll be ready," I promised, ending the call with a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. I immediately texted Tomas about the development. His response was quick. "He's trying to rush you into mistakes. Stay calm and stick to the plan." That evening, I laid out my outfit for the announcement party, an elegantly mysterious ensemble that nodded to the phantom aesthetic without being costumey. Every detail had been considered, from the subtle musical note pendant I would wear to the slightly unconventional makeup that would photograph dramatically under event lighting. Sleep proved elusive as my mind raced through contingency plans. What if someone from my past recognized my voice? What if Aiden somehow discovered our deception before we were ready to reveal it? What if the audience rejected me entirely? The possibilities spiraled until I finally drifted into restless dreams around 3 a.m. Tuesday dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself approved of our audacious plan. I woke to a text from Aiden. Big day, everything in motion. Announcement scheduled for 10 a.m. online. Then mainstream coverage throughout day. Tonight we celebrate. At precisely 10 o'clock, my phone exploded with notifications. The Elevation Records announcement had gone live across all platforms simultaneously. Press release, social media, music industry publications. My face stared back at me from websites and apps, captioned with variations of "Mystery solved, Elevation Records reveals phantom voice." Within minutes, my previously modest social media accounts gained thousands of followers. Comments ranged from excited to skeptical to outright hostile, the latter coming primarily from dedicated Phantom Voice fans questioning the authenticity of Elevation's claim. How convenient that a major label discovers who Phantom Voice is. The timing is suspicious. Those tracks have been out for weeks. Let's hear her actually sing live before we believe this. The skepticism was exactly what we had anticipated, the necessary foundation for phase 2 of our plan. Tomas called mid-morning, barely containing his excitement. It's working perfectly. The underground music forums are exploding with conspiracy theories. Some people are already suggesting the real Phantom Voice is someone else entirely. Has Elevation contacted you about the skepticism? I asked. Not yet, but they will, he predicted. Once they realize the backlash is gaining traction, they'll want to accelerate your public performances to validate their claim. He was right. By noon, Aiden called, his tone oscillating between celebration and concern. The announcement is everywhere, he began enthusiastically. Major coverage across all platforms. You're trending nationally. That's fantastic, I replied, matching his energy. I'm seeing the notifications. There is some pushback from the core Phantom Voice fanbase, he continued more cautiously. Expected with any reveal of this nature. We're thinking we should move up your first live performance to silence the doubters quickly. I allowed a hint of uncertainty to enter my voice. I thought we agreed to record in studio first, then build to live performances. Circumstances have shifted, he explained. The skepticism is spreading faster than anticipated. We need to demonstrate your authenticity immediately. What kind of timeline are you thinking? I asked, already knowing where this was headed. This weekend, he said. Small venue, controlled environment, select audience of industry and media. Just a couple of songs to prove the voice is truly yours. I paused, pretending to consider. That's very soon. What about the preparation we discussed? We'll provide everything you need, he promised quickly. Vocal coaches, rehearsal space, technical support, whatever makes you comfortable. I smiled at the phone, imagining his expression if he knew what was coming. All right, this weekend works, but I'll need to select the venue myself to ensure the acoustics support my particular vocal qualities. He hesitated only briefly. We usually handle venue selection, but given the circumstances, send us your top 3 choices by tonight. After ending the call, I immediately contacted Tomas. Phase 2 acceleration confirmed. They want a live performance this weekend. Perfect, he replied. I'll activate our response tonight during the party. Where are we holding this showdown? The Underground Echo, I said without hesitation. Intimate enough to feel exclusive, but large enough for impact. And their sound system can handle what we're planning. The countdown to the evening's launch party seemed to accelerate as I prepared. Each tick of the clock brought us closer to the next phase, the moment when the real Phantom Voice would publicly challenge Elevation's version. At precisely 4 p.m., a sleek black car arrived at my apartment. The driver, professionally detached, held the door as I settled into the leather back seat that smelled of expensive conditioning treatment and subtle air freshener. We glided through city traffic toward the elevation building for my final preparation. Inside, I was immediately whisked to a conference room that had been transformed into a styling suite. 3 people waited to perfect my appearance: hair, makeup, and wardrobe specialists, ready to create the image Elevation had decided would represent Phantom Voice. "We're thinking dramatic but approachable," the stylist explained, presenting a rack of carefully selected outfits. Mysterious enough to maintain the Phantom aesthetic but relatable enough for mainstream appeal. I examined their selections, all slightly more conventional than what I had planned to wear. The subtle attempt to reshape my image had begun already. "These are beautiful," I acknowledged diplomatically. "But I've actually prepared something specific for tonight that aligns perfectly with the brand. Would you mind if I showed you?" The glances exchanged between the stylists spoke volumes about how unusual this request was. New artists typically surrendered to the label's vision without question. "Of course," the lead stylist finally replied. "We're certainly open to collaboration." I retrieved my garment bag and revealed my carefully selected ensemble. The understated elegance with subtle theatrical elements clearly impressed them. The quality and thoughtfulness, obvious. "This is quite sophisticated," the stylist admitted, examining the fabric. "Your own design?" "A collaboration with an independent designer," I explained. "I wanted something that would honor the Phantom Voice aesthetic while being uniquely mine." The subtle assertion of creative control set the tone for the entire preparation session. I allowed their expertise in hair and makeup but maintained final approval on every decision. By the time they finished, the person in the mirror embodied exactly the image I wanted to project. Not Elevation's commercialized version of Phantom Voice, but my authentic artistic vision. Aiden appeared just before we departed for the venue, visibly pleased with the transformation but slightly puzzled by the ensemble. "You look incredible," he said, circling me with evaluative eyes. "Different from what marketing envisioned, but it works. You've given this considerable thought." "Phantom Voice deserves nothing less," I replied simply. The venue for the launch party was a renovated industrial space in Chelsea. Its exposed brick walls and strategic lighting creating an atmosphere of exclusive artistry. As our car approached, I could see photographers lined up behind velvet ropes, industry figures mingling near the entrance, and the unmistakable energy of a major music event. Aiden placed his hand lightly on my lower back as we exited the car, guiding me toward the photographers. "Ready to make your official debut?" he asked, his voice low and encouraging. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cool evening air mixed with the scent of his expensive cologne. This moment, walking into the spotlight as both myself and not myself, felt surreal in its complexity. "I've been ready for this my entire life," I replied truthfully, stepping forward to face the flashing cameras.